Nietzsche and Aurelius reveal society's greatest fear is independence. What if I told you that the single most disruptive, most feared force in society today isn't rebellion, isn't crime, and isn't even chaos, it's independence? Not the political kind, not the financial kind alone, but the kind of deep internal independence where your thoughts, your values, and your time are no longer governed by the invisible currents of conformity. You stop reacting and you start choosing. You stop consuming and you begin creating. You stop seeking permission and you begin living by your own code. That's the kind of independence that terrifies systems built on obedience. And that's exactly what Nietzsche and Marcus Aurelius tried to tell us centuries apart, yet echoing the same eternal truth. Nietzsche, the radical challenger of norms, and Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who ruled the most powerful empire on earth, both arrived at this chilling insight. Society doesn't actually want you to be free. It wants you to think you are free while quietly conditioning your values, your desires, and even your fears. You are told what success looks like. You are rewarded for staying busy. You are encouraged to be yourself, as long as that self aligns with the crowd.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But what happens when you unplug from the collective story? When you stop chasing the rewards it dangles in front of you and start writing your own? That's when society panics, because truly independent people cannot be controlled. They cannot be manipulated through shame, status, or scarcity. They don't need validation. They are not addicted to praise. And they are willing to walk alone. That, right there, is the societal nightmare. The individual who no longer needs the group. Let's break this down. Nietzsche spoke of the herd instinct, the tendency of people to follow the crowd, to merge into collectives, to find safety in sameness. He said that most people don't want truth. They want comfort. They want certainty. They want to be told what to do, because then they don't have to face the terror of choice. Choice means responsibility, and responsibility means you can no longer blame the world for your suffering. Independence, then, is not just inconvenient, it's dangerous, because it exposes everyone else's dependence. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his Meditations, faced the same truth, but from the throne. Imagine that, the most powerful man in the world, surrounded by wealth, flattery, and control, and yet in his journal, he writes not about conquest or power, but about the inner fortress. You have power over your mind, he says, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Even he knew, the only true freedom is internal. It's not about escaping the system. It's about transcending it, living in it, but not being owned by it. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, how much of your life is truly yours? Not your possessions, not your job, but your mind, your time, your dreams. How many of your decisions are made from a place of clarity rather than fear? How often do you act because you want to, and not because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't? You see, independence is not just a lifestyle, it's a confrontation. And it starts with the most painful question you can ask yourself. What if I've been living someone else's life? That's the question that cracks the illusion. Because once you see the invisible strings, social conditioning, peer pressure, media narratives, the silent fear of rejection, you can no longer pretend they don't exist. You start noticing how often you say yes when you mean no, how often you perform instead of express, how often you shrink yourself to fit into roles that no longer serve you. And then comes the turning point, the moment you realize that freedom isn't given, it's taken. That no one will ever hand you the keys to your mind, you have to forge them. And forging them means risk. It means stepping outside the approval of the group. It means being misunderstood, even hated. But as Nietzsche said, The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And he was right. Because the tribe doesn't want you strong. It wants you safe, predictable, manageable. But you weren't born to be managed. You were born to become. And becoming requires burning the script. It means letting go of the idea that your worth is tied to your productivity, or your appearance, or your ability to meet expectations. That's why Nietzsche called for the birth of the Übermensch, not a superior human in a physical sense, but someone who creates their own values, someone who lives from the inside out, someone who doesn't need society's permission to exist authentically. And Marcus Aurelius, he would remind you that the only thing you ever control is your response, not other people, not the world, just your own mind. And if you can master that, you are free no matter what your circumstances look like. So here's the challenge. Are you willing to disappoint others in order to stop betraying yourself? Are you willing to walk away from comfort, from approval, from certainty if it means reclaiming your soul? Because if you are, then you're not just thinking freely, you're living freely. And that, more than anything else, is what society fears most. The invisible chains, how comfort keeps you a prisoner while telling you you're free. We live in a world that worships comfort. Soft beds, fast food, instant entertainment, air-conditioned rooms, same-day delivery. Never before in human history have we had so many ways to avoid discomfort. And yet, despite all this convenience, depression is rising, anxiety is epidemic, and people feel more lost than ever. Why? Because comfort, when consumed mindlessly, doesn't free you, it sedates you. It numbs the edges of your soul. It convinces you to stay in a life that doesn't stir your spirit because, well, at least it's not painful. But pain has a purpose. It awakens us. It demands change. Comfort, when weaponized by society, becomes a prison that looks like paradise. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He warned against the dangers of becoming too domesticated, too civilized. He spoke of the last man, a creature of modernity who has traded all ambition, risk, and creativity for safety, routine, and mediocrity. The last man doesn't suffer, but he also doesn't live. He avoids all struggle, and in doing so, avoids greatness. He is the final product of a society that fears independence, because independence requires courage, and courage is born in discomfort. Now think about how society grooms us with comfort. It teaches us from an early age that discomfort is bad, failing a test, being rejected, challenging authority, standing alone. We're trained to avoid those things at all costs. But discomfort is the birthplace of strength. Marcus Aurelius knew this intimately. As a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, he faced betrayal, war, plague, and the crushing weight of leadership. And yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the obstacle is the path. Independence isn't found by avoiding hardship, it's forged in it. But comfort whispers in our ears, "Stay here. It's warm. It's easy. You don't have to try." And the more we listen, the more we shrink. Not because we're weak, but because we've forgotten how to be strong. Society doesn't have to imprison you with bars. It just has to convince you that the couch is safer than your calling. That mediocrity is better than failure. That following the crowd is easier than finding your own way. And here's the real tragedy. Comfort masquerades as freedom. You choose your job, your clothes, your streaming service, your coffee order. It feels like choice. But what if every one of those choices is still inside the matrix? What if the real choice, the choice to question everything, to build your own values, to live on your own terms, is one you've been conditioned to ignore? When Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, He wasn't talking about someone with superpowers. He was talking about someone who had the strength to say no to societal programming, someone who could endure discomfort for the sake of becoming who they truly are. Because real independence isn't about escaping pain. It's about embracing meaningful pain, the kind that transforms, that carves character, that reshapes your identity from the inside out. Marcus Aurelius, in his quiet, meditative reflections, echoed the same truth. He didn't seek luxury. He didn't cling to comfort. He saw life as a training ground for the soul. He believed that we are not here to be entertained, we are here to become better, wiser, more aligned with nature and reason. And nature, as he often reminded himself, is not comfortable. It is raw, unpredictable, and brutally honest. Just like the journey to independence. So ask yourself, what comforts are keeping you small? What have you convinced yourself is good enough just because it's not painful? Where have you settled for safety instead of striving for truth? These questions are not easy, but they're necessary. Because the longer you stay sedated by comfort, the harder it becomes to hear the quiet voice of your own soul calling you forward. You see, society doesn't fear your suffering, it fears your awakening. It doesn't mind if you're unhappy, as long as you stay quiet and functional. But when you start to say, no more, when you begin to trade comfort for clarity, escapism for effort, sedation for sovereignty, that's when the system starts to tremble. Because you're no longer a passive consumer, you're a conscious creator. And that's what independence really is, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of self, the rising of a flame within you that refuses to be extinguished by ease. The bold, terrifying, magnificent act of choosing your own path even if it burns. Rebellion of the soul. Why choosing yourself is the most radical act of all. There comes a point in your life where you feel something shift. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but it's unmistakable. This quiet, unsettling realization that the version of you that's been living your life, the one who obeys, who compromises, who seeks approval, is not the real you. It's a shadow, a placeholder, a version sculpted by expectations, by fear, by the need to belong. And when that moment comes, when you finally see it, you can never unsee it. That's the beginning of the rebellion. But let's be clear, this is not the kind of rebellion you see in movies. It's not flashy. It's not about smashing institutions or shouting in the streets. It's deeper, more dangerous, because it starts within. It's the rebellion of the soul. It's choosing yourself, not the self you've been taught to be, but the one you actually are. The one you abandoned to survive. The one you buried to fit in. And society, for all its noise about individuality, is terrified of that choice. Because someone who chooses themselves cannot be manipulated. They won't buy things to fill a void. They won't work jobs they hate just to impress people they don't respect. They won't chase hollow victories. They'll build their lives slowly, deliberately, from the inside out. And nothing threatens a system built on mass compliance more than a person who has remembered their own authority. Nietzsche knew exactly what this looked like. He saw that the world doesn't kill your soul with violence, it kills it with comfort, with routine, with small compromises stacked over decades. He wrote, "Become who you are, not who your parents want you to be, not who your culture rewards, not even who your younger self imagined, but who you are now underneath the masks." That's the real act of creation, reclaiming yourself in a world that profits from your self-abandonment. Marcus Aurelius, his philosopher-king counterpart, understood this too. In his meditations, he constantly reminded himself to act according to nature, his own nature, not to seek applause, not to avoid pain, but to live in accordance with the truth within. That's what Stoicism teaches us, the power of inward alignment, the courage to stand alone if necessary, and the wisdom to know that inner peace cannot be negotiated with external approval. But here's the price of choosing yourself. You will be misunderstood. You will be judged. You will lose people. The version of you that everyone liked was predictable, agreeable, easy to control. The real you, that's a wildfire. And wildfires make people uncomfortable. But they also clear the ground for new life, for truth, for depth. And that's what this rebellion is really about, not destruction, but transformation. And so you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to lose in order to find myself? Because something will be lost. The comfort of fitting in, the simplicity of certainty, the illusion of safety. But what you gain is worth more than all of it: sovereignty, integrity, and the quiet, unshakable power of a soul that no longer compromises. Choosing yourself is not just personal. It's cosmic. It's the point at which you stop echoing the world and begin speaking your truth into it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you were always here to do. The final escape, living freely in a world that trains you to obey. So what does it look like to live freely in a world that is engineered to make you obedient? It's not about escaping to the mountains or deleting every app on your phone, though sometimes true change does require radical steps. But more often, true freedom is quiet, subtle. It begins with awareness. The moment you realize that your deepest instincts, your wildest dreams, your most honest feelings have been filtered through a system that taught you not to trust yourself, that's the moment you begin to escape. Because now you're awake. And when you're awake, you start choosing. You choose differently. You say no to things that used to define you. You stop chasing goals that don't feel like yours. You begin to notice how every ad, every algorithm, every social script is designed not just to sell you something, but to sell you to the system. And in that noticing, there is quiet power. You are no longer a puppet. You are the observer, the sovereign, the one who chooses. Nietzsche warned us that the greatest threat to the future is the herd, the collective mind that values sameness over authenticity, safety over truth. And Marcus Aurelius reminded us to return, again and again, to reason, to nature, to the clarity of our own minds. Together, these two thinkers deliver a message that is almost too raw for the modern world. You must save yourself from the world you were born into. Not because the world is evil, but because it doesn't know who you are. Only you do. But living freely doesn't mean you abandon the world. It means you walk through it untouched by its illusions. You play the game, but you don't let the game play you. You work, but your identity is no longer shackled to your job. You speak, but your voice is not borrowed. You love, but not out of fear of being alone. Everything shifts. Maybe no one else can even see it, but you can feel it. The weight lifts. The fog clears. You are no longer reacting. You are responding. You are no longer seeking. You are expressing. And the final escape, it's not about getting out. It's about getting in, into your own soul, into your own mind, into a life that is deliberately and unapologetically yours. This is the independence that society fears, not because it's dangerous to others, but because it's contagious. When one person wakes up, they light a path for others. And that path is not paved with comfort. It's paved with courage. So now I ask you, will you keep living the life that was handed to you? Or will you risk becoming who you truly are? Because freedom isn't found out there. It's found the moment you decide to stop asking for permission. The moment you realize you were never meant to obey. You were meant to be.